Hey, welcome to Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. This series is important for all public safety aviation units. It's important because we discuss the audit that was released by the LA City Controller's Office on the LAPD Air Support Division. The Controller's audit, in essence, questions the size, scope, and effectiveness of the Air Support Division. It appears this report was politically motivated and contains many fallacies in concept, and what it reports is factual information. The LAPD Air Support Division is well equipped to deal with and respond to the report to justify their program based on the stats they keep and the details of the program they keep track of. We've many times discussed how air support programs are the low-hanging fruit when it comes to politicians and bean counters. This 3-part series will talk about LAPD Air Support's program and how what they do will help shape the way your agency keeps track of stats and program information. To discuss the audit, we brought in Mike Daly, who retired from LAPD after nearly 34 years of service. If you ever went to LAPD's aircrew course, you most likely heard Mike's course and his legendary one-liners. Mike Daly grew up in Latham, New York, enlisting in the military immediately after graduating high school in 1976. After his discharge from active duty, he returned to New York and attended college. In May of 1983, he was hired by LAPD and completed nearly 34 years of service. Mike worked his way to air support, having worked assignments in patrol, including 77th Division. He was a Metro Cannon handler, worked Rampart as a gang unit OIC sergeant and watch commander before he was selected to air support, where he was a watch commander and command pilot. Mike also completed a total of 24 years of military service with the U.S. Army in both the active and reserve components. Sergeant Daly served over 7 years in active duty, including an 18-month combat tour in Iraq. In this episode, we finished talking about the LAPD Air Support Division's Regional Disaster Preparedness Training Exercise, which is also known as the LAPD Chili Fly-In, by talking about the importance of the administrative portion of the training process. We get into discussing the inaccuracies contained within the audit written by the LA City Controller. And lastly, we talk about the importance of keeping accurate and detailed logs so that when you're called to defend the costs associated with your program, you can do so. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Precision Aviation Group, Technosonic, and CNC Technologies. Cheers.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
When I talk about the chili flying, my eyes glaze over and I just go into a trance. I do miss it. I do miss the chili flying. So,
if I can, John, I'll just fill in some blanks here. That was amazing, Mike. But just to paint some pictures for people who don't know what this is, and some of the things that Mike was talking about there, LAPD Air Support, the heliport is the largest rooftop heliport in the world.
Yeah.
I believe that's still true.
Yep.
We can probably park on a chilly fly-in day. It wasn't unusual to have 18 aircraft on that deck parked. Mm-hmm. And then there was multiple aircraft coming in and out while there's a park. When Mike mentioned Dodger Stadium, that was kind of for the bigger military aircraft that we couldn't fit or just overflow. And then we arranged it that SWAT helped us there, and we'd have vans going back and forth from Dodger Stadium to our facility. And yes,
escorted by motors, but pretty
escorted
cool.
by motors. It was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really cool. And it all meshes into this training. It really does. Is there chili inside the hangar? Yeah. There is. There's also cheesecake, and there's also, other desserts and cookies. But the point is that we're moving hundreds and hundreds of people in and out of that place with multiple jurisdictions, some that have never been to that heliport before, some that have. And it is a monumental task that is made to look pretty darn easy when it's happening. It's not easy. Mike and I can tell you all day, it is not easy. It is stressful. It is intense. It is about a 3 to 4 hour event where there's 200 plus takeoffs and landings from that deck. That doesn't count the overflow at Dodgers. But it has so many valuable training parts to it. So that I just wanted to mention that just to kind of fill in because Mike's given the justification beautifully. I mean, you're almost obligated to do it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other words that was used in the audit was unnecessary.
Yeah. Okay.
Unnecessary. It's not unnecessary if your family needs to be evacuated to get to a medical facility because the hospital downtown is leveled, and now we got to go to a San Bernardino hospital, and the only way to get you there, because there's overpasses that are collapsed, is by aircraft.
Right.
Those are the people that are going to go, wow, I'm glad these guys practice this.
Yeah.
Because if you don't practice it, there will be an incident or accident.
Absolutely.
I say that with confidence.
I guarantee
it would just
you,
happen. You know?
I guarantee you, if it happened tomorrow, if the big one hit LA tonight and it happened tomorrow and air support pulled it off with the stuff they in Chile flying, the city controller will be saying it was because of his audit. He would be jockeying for positions to take credit for that. Yeah. I guarantee you that. Now, and he'd be in a long line, Mike, of people trying to take credit. Yeah,
because it would be a success.
Yes.
And it would be a success because on a moment's notice, not only LAPD personnel, but Ontario PD and Pasadena and Burbank and the sheriffs and Orange County, all these agencies, you go down the list all the way to San Diego, they would all say, well, that went pretty well. And you know why? Because we've been there before. We've been there before, and we did that before. And the people in LAPD that could hop up to the tower or work the deck, they go, this was no big deal. We do it every November.
Right.
You know, and we could get the job done. And that job may last for days or weeks or months. I mean, I just looked at a picture this morning. I don't know why it popped up of a 1964 earthquake in Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, the main street is buckled by 25 feet, where some of the street is 25 feet lower than the opposite side of the street where these stores are. And then could that happen tonight in Los Angeles? And the answer is yes. We've lived with that for forever. And that's why it's when I read that word unnecessary, I just dismissed it as pure ignorance. None of those auditors know anything about that Chile fly-in. They don't know anything about it. It's all nonsense. If they've never attended it, I mean, John, you just attended it. You got to see it firsthand on the deck back in November. There's a lot of moving parts as a witness. It's so valuable in so many ways. Is it also fun? Yeah. Is it also really cool to interact with air traffic controllers and put faces with voices and all that? Yes. I mean, there are things about it that are beyond the training aspect that are wonderful to network and to communicate and to learn from each other and talk. But the gist of it is we are ready. That the air support division is ready. Yeah. And many of the agencies around us are also ready because they know, well, if we have to go to air support, we know how to get there. We know the airspace. We know where they're going to hold us. We know how to land there. We know the frequency. We know the routes in and out. There's a lot going on. Yeah. And without that Chile fly-in, it would be a catastrophe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just one thing, if I can throw this out for the listeners, is there's a massive amount of paperwork that goes with that. And Jack has all of it on digits. I've sent everything, the op order, the risk assessment, the ICS, the press release, everything. There's like some 44 documents that are written in the event action plan. Jack has all of it on Word. Anybody, have him get a hold of him. I claim no ownership of it. Plagiarize the shit out of it if you want to. We explain the whole thing in an op order, a concept, operation, whole thing. If anybody wants it, I'll be more than glad to give them whatever. Jack's got it and send it out. So
happy to do it. Our agency and unit have always been that way about sharing. John's talked about it on the podcast many times. It's true. It's not phony. It's the real deal. And we want to share, which brings us back to why we're here today. Why the three of us are sitting here chatting. Have we made mistakes? Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, Mike never made a mistake. But, I mean, just to give you an example of how we learned, there was there was one chili fly-in many years ago where it did not go well. There were people on holding, waiting to land over West Hollywood. I mean, and it took them, they were like running out of fuel, and it was unacceptable. And in the debrief, we figured out the problem, and somebody stepped up to the plate. I'll tell you who it was. It was Bob Bean. Bob Bean had an Army aviation background, and he said, we can fix this by doing this, this, and this on the flight deck. It was a tower issue. And we changed the entire concept of landing at air support, where we would land 3, even 4 aircraft running on the deck at a time, where they'd come in one at a time, but they would land and hold, and the next one would land and hold, land and hold. And we'd be unloading 3 or 4 aircraft at one time.
All right.
Not unusual at all in today's chili fly-in. Back then, it didn't happen, and it caused a backup. So we brought in somebody who have experience. They came up with a new plan. He brought in some people. That was my first time in the tower. He brought me in. He brought Pat McNamara in. He brought others in, and we said, just tell us what to do. And we did it, and that system works. But we learned through mistakes, and we fixed it. And it happens. The debriefs are very good after the chili fly-ins. The debriefs are really good because there's always things that happen where we went, oh, we did not like that.
Yep.
How can we fix that? You know what? That was a miscommunication between me and the aircraft, or a miscommunication between the tower and the deck crew, or whatever it was. But we would fix it. We were very open-minded, and that's why it evolved into what it is today. And
one person almost walked into a tail rotor one time, and we said, no, we don't have enough people. We brought in SWAT. You know, if you remember, that's why we brought them in. The biggest problem we used to have was departures, because it's like herding cats, and we could never figure that one out. And Gene Savedon one day said, I got it. And he has a system in where they page the people, and and so really, although my name is associated with it, there are a lot of players that did their piece of the puzzle, and that's my advice to units. If you're just the officer in there, what's your piece, and make sure no one does your piece better than you. You know, and if you can help. I mean, that's how we got out of caves, is thinking there's a better way to do this, right? So
departures was always a nightmare, because everybody wanted to stay. I mean, all these air traffic controllers, they're sitting in there, eating chili and mingling and learning and talking and communicating and
seeing helicopters come in. Yeah,
exactly. And it's fun to watch. Tower people would come up to our tower and go, wow. Yeah, they would. And we go, oh my gosh. An LAX tower person's over my shoulder going, wow. They loved it. They stayed. So we'd have to try and figure out, now, how do we get them back to their home bases? It was a nightmare. But Gene was very significant in that.
But that goes why you do that. Those are problems you're going to have when the balloon goes up. You're going to have a helicopter show up to pick up 4 people, and there's 8 people there. How do you fix it? You can do that whole chili fly-in on paper. But you're not going to get those challenges that you're going to get when the real world occurs. The commander of the Coast Guard Air Station LA one time, he said, he tells everybody that goes there, you will never work with more agencies than you will in Southern California. He said he said everywhere else they're on their own. He said here we very rarely work with the Coast Guard. They work with us. They work with, and so that that matters. That matters. So I think we covered that.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
You said something that resonated with me. You talked about it being an investment. It's an investment of time, and the payout is huge. You talked about FEMA and the federal government. If you don't have the right forms and administrative things in place, you may not get funding
Right.
to help you, replace the money that you spent with that operation, whatever that was. He talked about the need for an ongoing investment in time. It can't just be a one and done type thing, because like you said, each time you do something, you learn something new, and things change over time, whether it's technology or procedures or whatever the thing is. So I guess my point is it has to be ongoing, and you guys do that. So the last thing I'll touch on is we talk about in the podcast a lot. You don't want your first time doing something to be your first time doing something. So if you're an agency that there's potential for something happening, whether it's, natural disaster or terrorist attack or whatever the thing is, where you might have this need, don't wait for that thing to happen, because the lessons that you would have learned had you done this prior are going to be learned during that operation, and it might cost lives, So I love the idea of the investment, because it is an investment of time and resources. And it's also, I hadn't thought about this like this before, but not only is it an operational training exercise, but it's an administrative training exercise, which you illustrated, knowing what forms need to be filled out and where they go, and how that puzzle fits together. That's the critical part of that. And I don't know that we did that real well at my agency. And, maybe that's something that changes going forward. So thanks for the illustration of that. It's great.
And by the way, one last thing on this is that even though that chili flying is occurring for that day, and it is a huge event, patrol operations are an element of it. There's still patrol ships launching and recovering at 2.5 hour intervals. And so there is nothing that the city is doing without that day. It is business as usual at air support for supporting the ground officers and supporting whatever missions there are. We're not saying, oh yeah, we're just going to skip going to robbery call today because we want to have chili flying. That's the other thing they made it sound like. They made it sound like they're just doing this unnecessary stuff. And it's just chili and blah blah blah. It's nonsense. That there's a whole element of patrol keeps working.
Yeah,
and it's seamless. It's just amazing. It's an all hands on deck day. Every single person. There's no days off. Everybody's in there. Everybody's doing something. Some people are there cooking chili overnight. Some people are working the deck, the tower, departures, patrol, working the patrol shifts.
We man all 3 shifts. There's guys that are not there because they're working morning watch, flying Astro.
Yeah, it's a big day. It is the busiest day at that heliport of the year. It's, and like I said, it's challenging, it's stressful, but it's fun. And we all learn stuff and we get better, and it looks seamless, but it's only because it's been done for many, many years and we've learned. And we made our mistakes.
Capability, that's part of the exercise. What did you learn when you did it this year? Maybe admin, maybe, expand that capability. There is a point there where we're taking off and landing aircraft at less than 1 minute intervals, which makes us the busiest airport. And not just heliport, the busiest airport in the world. So it's fun. I that's what I miss.
I do too.
I miss that one. I thought it was interesting this year because it was on the news, and they were reciting what I had written about it being an exercise, chapter and verse. So I know they're still cutting and pasting, but anyway, I'm sorry. But hey,
this last year was great. You have a new captain that's running the PIO operations, and she seems to have a really good vision of how she sees information on LAPD getting out. She's doing a great job. The last point I'll make, and I don't want to speak for LAPD, but LAPD, like we talked about, they're always willing to provide the information that you might need for your agency to do whatever the job you want to do better is. They've had the repetitions and the experience of how to fix problems. So reach out to them. Like I said, our agency, we were wanting to do our first fly-in, and we reached out to LAPD and said, hey, can we come out and help work the deck on your chili fly-in? So we did that. And the lessons that we learned through that 1 year helping on the deck, we translated into our fly-in. And that was really helpful. So if you're an agency, again, I don't want to speak for LAPD, but I'd imagine if you're wanting to learn how this operation works so you can use that at your agency, I get in touch with LAPD and ask, how can I help out and how can I observe? I guarantee there's
that has not changed. Mike and I've been gone a while, but I'm telling you, we both know that has not changed. You can still reach out, whatever it is. LAPD does some things really, really well that we don't do as a wide variety of missions. But when it comes to patrol and when it comes to things like this, we have a lot of experience and we're willing to share it. And that is still true.
Yeah.
What I always say is if you think we can help you, go ahead and call us, because if we think you can help us, we will call you, and we have, and we have. You know, at times, you know, they're on a variety of things. So, but by all means, call us if you think we can help you do something, because if we have any hint that you may be able to help us, we're going to ring your phone off the wall. So
our industry is really good about, you know, helping other agencies get better.
Mm-hmm.
We're not hoarding information. It's not, you know, the seagull mine type thing. It's let's help each other out. And I really love the community aspect of aviation for that reason.
I do too.
I want to switch gears a little bit and start talking about the audit. The chili flying fit in really nicely with the audit, and I honestly couldn't have planned that any better. So in a way, I'm thankful this audit came out, because it allowed me to talk about some important things and drive home some points that we've talked about in the podcast quite a bit. Yeah. But, you know, again, like we had talked about earlier, part of the reason to talk about the audit is to refute some of the findings that were written in that article, or not the article, but the report. It's a 60 something page report. The first, I think 3 pages of it are just the summary by itself. And, you know, reading through it, there's a ton of holes, and it's fairly obvious to me that whoever wrote that didn't have all the information. It didn't really make an effort to obtain all the information. So to start that, Jack, can you just kind of encapsulate briefly what the audit talked about and some of the points from that? So
the audit is from the LA City Controller. His name's Kenneth Mejia. If you look up Kenneth Mejia, you will see that his title that is online is Activist, Accountant, LA City Controller. You can find him on TikTok doing videos in his office. And I mean, you can see right off the bat, this is a person that is not pro-police. He's a defunder. He calls it right sizing. That word, right, those words, right sizing, is in that report a lot. That's a defund the police term. Good. The report overall, what I found when I read it, like John said, three pages of summary. That's what got put out. And they were very smart. They gave those 3 pages out to the media, and they did their cute little videos and touched on that summary. Well, the summary doesn't say one single word of what you get for the money that's being spent. It was all about they're spending a fortune. It's a waste. It's unnecessary. They're doing this wrong. They're not doing anything, blah, blah, blah. The summary has no bang for the buck. It's all about the bucks. Then the other 62 pages or 61 pages actually tell you there's actually facts in there that back up what LAPD air support and air supports around this country all do. But the report is, when I looked at it, I found it to be biased, lazy, and lacking knowledge. Those things came into my mind. I read it multiple times, and the first time I got mad, and then the next time I read it, I started to just laugh, because there was so many missing things and so much inaccuracy, and it is very biased. The numbers that they use, I mean, they're not even close in many ways. Some of the numbers are absolutely true, but for instance, just pulling this one out, they say it's $2,916 per flight hour. They love to mention that. The actual amount is about $800. Mm-hmm. $800 an hour. That includes maintenance, salaries, and fuel. Where they got that $2,916, they're just taking numbers and dividing it, and totals, and it's not a per hour cost for that helicopter. I got more text messages about that number saying, "Gee, what kind of A-stars are you guys flying at LAPD? Ours are $600 an hour." It's like that. I don't know where they got it. There's a lot of things in it, and one of the things that jumped out too, they like to say that this is a unit that is operated with limited oversight. Now, Mike's going to talk to that, I'm sure, because that's ridiculous.
Thank you to our sponsor, Technisonic Communications. Technisonic Communications is a proud provider of the critical airborne communications equipment utilized every day on every mission. Law enforcement, EMS, forestry, federal and military operators all trust their communications to Technisonic. Visit TIL.ca to learn how Technisonic can support your mission communications.
The amount of oversight on LAPD air support is very heavy. It always has been. Why? Because it's the number one budget item on LAPD's list. Of course, we've been scrutinized. It was not unusual at all to get scrutinized monthly or weekly by someone at the controller's office, at the mayor's office, at the chief's office. I mean, with internal and external. There's a reason that there's a huge heliport, built downtown, because the city a long time ago realized that this is an asset to fighting crime in this city. And they invested a lot of money. So no one is arguing that this is cheap, saying, oh, well, this is a cheap operation. Nobody's saying that. It is expensive. It is over $48 million a year. But what do you get for that? How many lives are saved? How many dollars are saved from pursuit lawsuits? How many officers are not killed in crashes during pursuits? How many officers are alive because an air unit was over their incident? Some of it you can't calculate. Some of it, I understand that. You can't, but some of it you can. I mean, if you look at pursuits alone, I'm just going to I got a lot of stats, but I'll throw out vehicle pursuits. Between 2018 and today, 2,424 vehicle pursuits air support's been over. 2,424. I mean, think of the potential in each of those incidents for tragedy. It's high. It's high. Pursuits are high risk, not for the public and for law enforcement. But when there's an aircraft overhead, it reduces that risk dramatically, and it reduces the possibility down the road for lawsuits, which cost tens of millions of dollars, much more. So they didn't calculate any of that in. We can, there's all sorts of other things that are going to come up here, but the big one that jumped out at me is some of their numbers are just completely off by thousands of dollars. They couldn't even get the gallons per hour right. They said it's 47.6 gallons per hour. I don't know about Mike, but I found out that unless you're flying max continuous for 2.7, it is not 47 gallons an hour. It's more like 34. But they take those little mistakes, and then you start adding dollar signs to it, and it looks like, oh my gosh, jet fuel is between $5.89 and $6.89 a gallon right now. Well, LAPD doesn't pay that. I don't know what we paid, but it ain't that. It's a lot lower because it is purchased
6 months at a time,
bulk. Yeah, by an entity in the city that buys jet fuel, gasoline. It's this big
petroleum products unit.
Yeah, it's huge. So we don't pay that. It was lazy. It was really lazy, and I'll just end by saying they just didn't show enough of what the bang is for the buck. That was my biggest complaint about it. They didn't want to talk about that, because if they do, people are going to go, well, I want that. I don't want people killed in pursuits. Well, neither do we. That's why we're there. We're able to get there and have units back off and track and do all these things that are saving lives. There's no doubt about it. How many lives? I don't know. Mike doesn't know. John doesn't know. But are we saving lives? Oh, it's absolutely yes. We just can't quantify it, and that's the hard part when you're dealing with an activist who's got an agenda, defund the police, anti-police, and wants to make this unit that's very expensive look bad. It's actually easy to do. He proved it. It's real easy to do. In a 3-page summary, if you just read that summary and believed every word of it, you'd go, well, that air support unit needs to be downsized or eliminated because, in the 3-page summary, it made it sound like, well, you're just spending millions of dollars. You're not getting anything. But that's false. It's completely false. And the media ran with it. That's the other problem. And he knew that. When he put that out, that 3 pages, he knew what the media was going to use. I mean, I got emails and texts and phone calls from around the world on this audit. People around the world saw this in a flash on social media or in the news and said, wow. So they knew what they were doing. Put out all the negative stuff, how much it costs. Don't tell anybody what they're getting for that dollar, and it'll draw attention. And here we are, trying to fight back a little bit and prepare other units so that when your controller comes after you, you got to be ready. Was LAPD ready? Air support ready? I think for the most part they were, but could we be better and even more prepared? I think yes. I think that they could be better prepared, and we could talk about that. But that's my overview of what I saw.
Yeah, I kind of a lot of similar feelings as you. And you talked about the budget. I think anytime somebody looks at a city budget and you look at air support, those numbers are going to catch your attention. So just by that virtue alone, you're going to draw a lot of attention to your program. So it's vital that you not only record stats that talk about what you've done, but that you prove your worth on a daily basis, because we're the low-hanging fruit in the financial tree. And when the day comes, your department or your city is looking to get money somehow, they're going to look at an aviation program. You've got to be an asset, not a liability. And I think we can prove we're an asset just through the stats and the things that we do to prepare that or present that. So, Mike, can I get your take real quick on the audit?
Yeah. First of all, you used the term that I was going to use. When I read this, what I saw was somebody going for the low-hanging fruit. Wow, aviation is expensive. It's like you said, how can you make a small fortune in aviation is you start with a big one. And a couple of things, because I read it with, if I was going to respond, if this came out and the CO called me in and said, you're going to respond to this. So just a couple of things as a leader, and you have to be auditing everything all the time. And you got to go to the dark places. You look at, there are things that we were looking and we weren't being efficient with, and guys didn't want to go there because you were opening Pandora's box. As a supervisor, you got to go there, and you can't be afraid to step on toes. You can't be afraid to step on your coworkers' toes. There's sergeants I don't get Christmas cards from, and I'll let you know when it bothers me, because it doesn't. But my father I have a few sayings. You may find that hard to believe, Jack. And one that came to mind when I read this. First one, my father used to say all the time when I was a kid, and I never saw a need for it until I read, an audit one time. And the saying is, figures don't lie, but liars figure. And what they talk about, and I actually saw this a lot recently, is salami slicing the data is the term they use. And it's usually when you have an agenda or you want something to prove and the data doesn't support your conclusion. If you take all that data, you find a slice of it that does, and that's the data you use. So that a couple other things: garbage in, garbage out, and that's obvious. If you have bad data coming in, your conclusions are going to be bad. And then this is something more. And I used to say this to officers all the time, and I used to try. And this is one of those lessons that once people learn the hard way, they realize. And it's nothing we do matters. Nothing we do ever matters at all until it matters. And then you can't go back and change it. Guys just pencil whip logs. It don't matter. The guys will approve it. Then there's the audit. Jack, before Rodney King, the 2 messages. No one ever listened to the 2 messages, and it didn't matter. But then they did an audit, and all of a sudden it mattered. So and that's hard to teach young, inexperienced coppers who haven't gone through major investigations or audits like this. You got to make sure they understand that those logs matter, and we'll talk about that.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
When I read the first ever audit of ASD, when I read that, and I read Jack Dunphy's article, and I said the same thing. This is grandstanding. This is, look at me, Mr. Cotter, Mr. Cotter. You know, the first ever audit. See how bitchin' I am. When I read that, I was so upset. You know, I know Chief Moore. I work with him at Rampart. You know, he is a friend, and you know, he's a busy man and all that stuff. And I don't. But when I read that, I actually text him, and I text him, and I said, you know, what are they talking about? And I told him, I reached out to Air Support. I got information they need, and the chief actually called me back, acknowledged my concerns and all that. So when I read that, now this is my advice to anybody reading the audit, and this goes with this audit or any audit. And my advice is read the audit. Now, that sounds like if I said look up redundant in a dictionary and you look it up and it says see redundant, but what I'm talking about is really pay attention to what you read in that audit. Okay, especially the wording. Now, side note, and this ain't surprising, if you go online to bring that audit up, its title, like if you put it in the computer thing, is I think it's LAPD helicopter audit final. Correct. Final. And what does that tell you? Now, something you already know. Final means it's been read. That thing has been reviewed. Before that went out, I guarantee at least 3 high-level reviews. That report was probably read and reviewed and corrected and sent back at least 5 times, probably. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. So if you read it and it doesn't say something, or you have a question about the wording, probably somebody else did also. And when they asked, they said, well, there's a reason that's worded that way. And so that's why you want to read the audit. And here's the point I like to make in the example I use. Since the discovery of tobacco, human life expectancy has doubled. That is a factually correct statement. All right? There's nothing wrong with that statement. It is factually correct. It's a fallacy because there's a lot not said in there, but the words used are factually correct. Which brings me to one of the things Jack said, the opportunity to right-size the organization is what he uses. And that's another thing. And I got pages in note, but I want to talk about this one. Now, he's not saying downsize, which if that's the whole thing about that report. Yeah. He wants to downsize. He don't want to say downsize because that has a negative connotation. He wants to right-size. Now, where my wife and I go shopping at there's a bakery there, and they have this really nice French bread. But as prices have gone up, the loaf has gotten smaller. And if I ask the baker, how come the loaf is getting smaller? And if he told me, well, I took this opportunity to right size the bread, you'd say, you know, but he chooses that word because he's right sizing. So if you don't agree with him, you're wrong sizing. You know, Arlo Guthrie, the great philosopher, once said you can't have a light unless you got a dark to put it in. Nothing exists without an opposite. And so he's saying, I'm right sizing the organization. So Jack, if you don't agree with me, you're wrong sizing. Yep. And he is claiming, very subtly claiming the moral high ground there. So, and there's examples through that where the message in the audit, a lot of it isn't written, and there's a lot of a very carefully choice of words and things he's done there that that really once again, that's why I say read the audit, pay attention. If you read something and it's not mentioned, that's something. And here's the best example. It goes, another one is the timing of that audit is suspect. He does it at the start of the fiscal year. Okay, if you work for the city of LA for more than 34 seconds, you know that the end of a fiscal year or the beginning of the fiscal year, you'll get absolutely nothing out of fiscal operations division. They're closing their books and they're starting. And that's when he picks to do the audit. The city controller, who lives and dies by the fiscal year, had no idea that that would be the bad time to do it. And so he referenced, hey, I went to LAPD to get the numbers, but fiscal operations division was busy because they're always busy this time of year. And then he said, I showed them my methodology. It stops right there. It doesn't say whether LAPD is... we agree with that methodology, whether it was a valid methodology, whether it was, whether it was good, we showed them the methodology. And so there's an implied message there that, of course, what they did was right. And I could go on, but it's like I say, if you read something and you have a question about it because it doesn't fully explain it, there's a reason for that.
Part of what bothers me, it's this guy's an elected official that's writing a report, and he's weaponized his position to benefit, in my opinion, his own electability for the position of Congress. You look at his background; he's ran for Congress 3 times. The first time as a Democrat, didn't do well there, so he changed to the Green Party, ran twice in the Green Party, and he's improved his position each time. So I think, as a Green Party activist, if you can show that you can hang your hat in the fact that I right-sided the LAPD Air Support Division, that's a big deal for them. So he'll gain traction just by that alone, which is wrong. You shouldn't weaponize a position like that in a topic like this. It's so critically important to the residents of LA and the police of LA that are actually working the street to have this resource. But he's using his own, again, in my opinion, his own leanings and his own motivation for this report to come out. So really disappointing. And
the pure proof of that, John, is that this is a city controller. This is an accounting position. This is about dollars and cents. Okay, then why would you have the following statement in there? And not only that, they fly below the recommended distance above the ground.
They fly.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't know what that means. He doesn't either. But fly below the recommended distance. I didn't know there was a recommended distance above the ground. I thought that there was, federal guidelines, and I thought there was towers that we had to listen to. And then he follows it up with helicopter noise is causing Angelenos stress, cognitive impairment, reduced metabolism, cardiovascular disease, heart attack, and stroke. Mike, I can't believe you did that, but you did. And not only that, Mike, here's something else you did. 7,400 metric tons of carbon. Okay. Now, we all know, everybody listening knows, those are talking points. That has nothing to do with dollars and cents, of this person's job. This is, it's a political hit piece, and that's just proof of it. Why would you include nonsense like that without any evidence that any of that's true? Just throws it in there.
Yeah.
I titled that Out of the Blue because I remember getting to that point and just going, oh my gosh, wow, this is just a political hit job. What in the world? All the credibility, any credibility that they might have had prior to those statements, in my book, they just lost. And believe me, they lost it a lot sooner than that. But the fact that they add things like that to an audit about dollars and cents it just shows what this is. It just shows it, and they prove it themselves. We don't have to argue it. We don't have to debate it. It just proves it. They proved it with their own words by adding stuff like that.
It looks to me like he's trying to appeal to the folks in the Green Party by including that information. To me, it's painfully obvious, which is a disappointment.
Obvious. I mean, we don't build the helicopters, man. It's not like we build them.
No.
So and it brings up a story, and I thought it was a good response to helicopter noise. And George Gonzalez, he used to have to go to community meetings where they would complain about helicopter noise, and he had an interesting response, and it dealt with, we had an attack suspect who was going around Griffith Park in the early morning hours. He was grabbing women that were jogging and raping them. and so we were doing patrols around Griffith Park, concentrating on that, and so George ends up going to one of these meetings, and this guy said that he had empirical data that the helicopter flights over Griffith Park were interfering with the mating life cycles of the coyotes in Griffith Park. And George's response
I
was,
remember that.
And George's response was, well, I'm just a police officer. I don't know about the coyotes' mating cycle in Griffith Park. But what we do know is there's a rape suspect running around in there, and we're trying to interfere with his mating cycle. And that kind of ended that argument. But, okay. I like all that stuff he brought out about how it causes cardiovascular disease and stress and all that, because I'm putting in for a disability pension.
Me too.
Look at me. It's the big one, Elizabeth. It's through the city.
We flew every night, and so I guess all that stuff can be directly blamed on that. Craziness.
A couple things I really wanted to talk about it, and because you talk about numbers, and a couple things I want to talk about numbers here real quick. One is the money. All right. Okay. And when I read that, there were certain things in the money that jumped right off the page at me. Okay. Because I've done this, and I've gone through, when you figure out how much money you save by doing stuff, how much things cost. And I don't know where he's getting his numbers from, and I can't verify. So these numbers so I don't know the source, but this is what concerned me. If you look, he talks about wage, and then he talks, I forget what he calls it, but it's wage burden. It's the benefits. Yeah. All right. And then he goes into aircraft maintenance costs. Now, I talked to George, and George, that was his job for years. He said, I have no idea. He's saying $12 million a year on maintenance. He said, we never spent more than $9 million. So I don't know where that number is coming from. It could be accurate. I don't know anymore. But talk about wage and wage burden, because I've done this a million times, and this is something that really jumps off, and how when you start compounding these things, this is how you get to that $2,700 an hour. Wage is what we pay you. Wage burden is what the city pays for your benefits. And wage burden is usually more than wage. And just because I did this for years, and every time I did audits with LAPD and you had to get manpower costs, the city likes 125%. That's what, when they go with the contracts, and every time I used to call Fiscal Operation Division, I need wage and wage burden, it was always 125% of base pay based on a 40-hour week. Okay, that's what it's over. That's why they like overtime, because they don't have to pay that 125%. They're just paying 50% more. It's 125%. So let me explain it to you. If you were being paid $20 an hour wage, your wage burden is $25 an hour. So the city's really paying $45 an hour for you. It's 125%. Now, if you work air support where you have pay bonuses, it's 125% of base pay. The city doesn't pay more for your health insurance because you're getting paid, it's 125% of base pay. And the first thing you look at that number, he's got it at 170%. And so I don't know where that's a big chunk of money, 50% of that. I don't know where that other 50% comes from. My assumption is he's doing it with overtime and above base pay. So I those numbers could be accurate because the city has changed a lot, but that jumped off. And in the civilian employees, he has that at almost 200%. All right. Now, so and once again, this gets back to the city agreed to our methodology, end of sentence. You don't see a response there, and the city and the police department wasn't providing these numbers. And that's why this timing and that language is critical. And so that is something I had to say. Approximately language. Helicopters purchased for the LAPD can cost between approximately $4 million and $6 million. They can also cost $90 million if we bought Blackhawks, but that has nothing to do with anything. It says can cost. Once again, I did that audit, on how we purchase. We pay 3.3 for a completed aircraft. We buy them green for 1.9. The GSD, it's about $1 million labor to paint them and to put all the equipment on, and the MICLA funding is about $400,000 per aircraft. And I can tell you more about MICLA that I want to kill myself because that is so boring. So once again, that's why I say read the audit and pay attention to the words used. So he does an interesting thing about the over-policing claim. And this one, I sorry if I'm taking over, but I got to talk about this. Okay, and I want to read it. Okay. Some LAPD areas were disproportionately impacted by helicopter activities related to the rate of Part 1 crime. Some LAPD areas experienced a larger share of LAPD helicopter flights relative to the rate of Part 1 crimes in the area, while some patrol areas experienced a smaller share. The 77th Street area in South Los Angeles had the largest share of flights relative to Part 1 crimes, while the Pacific and West LA area had the fewest. This is important because excessive exposure to helicopters can negatively impact quality of life and can create equity concerns in certain communities are subject to over-policing. First of all, I don't know what over-policing is, but that is an inflammatory statement that basically implies that LAPD is the occupation army and a bunch of racist thugs, and there's no way. Now, interesting thing he did with the numbers there is he turns them into separate percentages and then compares them to one another. And this is slicing salami. Some people call making this a fruit salad because you're comparing apples to oranges. Okay, if you look at those numbers, and I really want to talk because it really shoots it down. There is, over that time, there were almost 630,000 Part 1 crimes, and there was about 150,000 Airport Division responses. They take out a bunch of stuff. So now he turns those into percentages, which then makes them the same number, but they're not. There's a 500,000 difference. So I'll take 77 because the data doesn't tell me what he's saying it does. And they responded. 8.9 of their responses were there, but 6.4% of the Part 1 crimes were there. So that, that kind of brings up this over-policing and all of that stuff. And he's saying over-policing. But if you look at those numbers, the first thing that tells me is that's the highest percentage of Part 1 crimes. And that's the highest number of our responses. So we are concentrating on Part 1 crimes. But if you did it the way you're supposed to and not turn them into the same number, if you compare them to one another, which is what people care about, we responded to 23% of the Part 1 crimes. That makes an argument maybe we should be bigger if we're only getting to 1 out of 4.
Yep, that's right.
And now I want you to go to 77th because the 23% was the average. And when you do these numbers this way, Jack, which I did, you know why? We're not in Central because of the buildings. We're not in Harbor because they're in the East Hebrides. Yep. And you can see the numbers. We respond to Part 1 crimes in 77th Street Division 32% of the time. And so now what I want you to do is go to 77th and tell somebody that because we're able to get to 1 out of 3 murders or robberies or rapes in your area, as opposed to 1 out of 4, you're being over-policed. He had to use, this is slicing the salami. This is getting the numbers to say what he wants to say. That is that, and that's the center of gravity of that report. That not only are they a bunch of cowboys who flout best practices, is how he said that, Jack, about the thing, which is, the center of gravity is that, and so that is actually very easy to refute. Tell me I'm over policed because you can only get to 1/3 of my major crimes. So I'm sorry,
No, it's a big part of it. It's
It's a good
interesting
point.
because you get to the end of the report that he put out. He talks about a focus group they held, and he talks about how the respondents felt about the presence of police, whether it was by helicopter or by ground. And majority, and by his own words, a majority of the respondents had a favorable opinion of police presence in their communities.
Yes.
But I think what he goes on to say is more than one person. He follows up by saying more than one person felt that it had a negative impact in their life. Well, what is more than one person? Is that two?
Yeah.
Out of how many people were in the focus groups?
Exactly.
But all those people talk about the benefits of having a police presence, the feeling of a safe neighborhood, the reduction in crime, all those benefits that come as a result of the police presence, and it's just, it's like you said, slicing, would you say slice by salami
slicing
the data to make it, work in his favor. It's again, disappointing to see this position turn into a weaponized political assassination of air support. This is the end of part 2 with our conversation with Mike Daly. Join us for part 3, where we continue to discuss the audit released by the LA City Controller's Office. Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support. Thank you to our sponsor, Technisonic Communications. Technisonic Communications is a proud provider of the critical airborne communications equipment utilized every day on every mission. Law enforcement, EMS, forestry, federal and military operators all trust their communications to Technisonic. Visit TIL.ca to learn how Technisonic can support your mission communications. Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Thanks for sticking around and supporting our sponsors who make these conversations possible. We encourage you to Google the LA City Controller's Office audit, where you'll see the report in its entirety. While it's frustrating to see an air support program attacked for political reasons, I think this will encourage us all in public safety aviation to ensure we're doing the best job possible in keeping accurate logs, stats, and standard operating procedure manuals. If you have questions or best practice recommendations, please share them with us by email or by DM on social media. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.